Good afternoon, and welcome to CAE's virtual panel discussion, A Global View on ESG Best Practices and Why It Should Matter to Suppliers. Bienvenue à la table ronde virtuelle de CAE, une vue globale sur les bonnes pratiques ESG et pourquoi les fournisseurs doivent s'y intéresser. My name is Salima Lalji. I lead CAE's Global Strategic Sourcing, Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion team, and it is my privilege to be your moderator for today's event. The presentations and panel discussion will be in English. Les présentations et la table ronde se tiendront en anglais. À la fin des présentations, nous tiendrons une période de questions-réponses où vous pourrez poser vos questions en anglais ou en français. Today's agenda is as follows. Hélène Gagnon, Chief Sustainability Officer and Senior Vice President, Stakeholder Engagement at CAE, will make remarks on CAE's ESG initiatives. Followed by remarks from Bernard Ross, Vice President, Global Strategic Sourcing and Real Estate Services at CAE, and followed by our panel discussion. We will have a question-answer session in the end. You can ask your questions in the chat box. You should see a Q&A button on your top screen where you will be able to ask your questions. It is now my pleasure to invite Hélène Gagnon to make her address. Hélène?
Yes, good day everyone. Bonjour tout le monde. Merci d'être avec nous aujourd'hui. Thanks to all the suppliers joining us today to discuss something very important to CAE. One of our strategic priority is to actually drive an ESG peer leading agenda. And we can't do it alone. We're all intertwined on this ESG journey, and therefore it's very important that we start having this engagement and conversation together. So what is ESG? And maybe we could start showing a first slide. For many, many years, I think people were talking about sustainable development and then corporate social responsibility, very much voluntary measures. But today we use the terminology ESG, E for environmental, S for social, G for governance, and it's more linked toward disclosure, reporting, and even leading to some mandatory disclosures. So if we look at what environmental means, so typically that's easier for people to understand, is the company performance as a custodian of nature. So climate impact, carbon footprint, but also climate change adaptation, because although we are going to try to reduce our carbon footprint, we know there's going to be some climate change extreme scenarios, and we'll need to adapt to that. Waste management, air and water pollution, resource depletion, biodiversity, and sustainable products and services. So typically people understand the E pretty well. The S is probably the letter that is the less understood, because it could be very, very broad. So it's the overall impact on society, relationship with employees, customers, suppliers, and the community. So typically we focus also with our purpose. In the case of CAE, our purpose is to make the world safer. But on the social pillar, we have the health and well-being of employees, safety of our people, but also of our products, working conditions, human rights, and modern slavery, diversity, equity, and inclusion, data privacy. So it's a pillar that could be all-encompassing and sometimes more difficult to understand. The pillar under governance is the one that is focused on management, accountability, transparency of the corporate practices and procedures. So that's where we have the tone at the top, the board oversight and management, alignment of interests between the various stakeholders, but also executive compensation, shareholder rights, ethics, and supplier management. So it gives you an idea, but we know that not everybody is at the same level of maturity, I would say, in ESG. And that's why we're hosting this seminar. Even for us, honestly, at CAE, we did not do all of this overnight, and I'll come back on this. So why ESG? And maybe we could go to the next slide. Why is it important, and why do we feel that ESG brings some benefits? Well, some people look at ESG with just a focus on risk and managing cost, but we see it as really creating enterprise value. We see it as a critical component to the long-term sustainable growth of our companies, access to capital, our competitiveness, our talent acquisition, and much more. So when you look at the why of ESG and you start focusing only on risk and cost management, you're missing out on a lot of the benefits that ESG is going to bring. We see that it's going to bring a lot of business opportunities. And right now, we know that a lot of our customers, whether in civil aviation with the airlines, but also on defense and security from the various governments, we are being asked by our customers what we're doing in terms of ESG, social value, and therefore it could be a discriminator, a way to gain more contracts and more business. And again, we can't do it alone. We have to be connected with our suppliers. It brings, of course, a lot of more of innovation, competitive advantage, and we know more and more that there's a sustainability linked loans, sustainability linked bonds, and therefore we could have access to more capital at some premium rates if we are a leader in ESG. We know that it reinforces talent attraction and retention and employee engagement. So in the world that we live in, where there's a lot of labor shortage, this is very important. Very important. And of course, it's going to help us reinforce the relationships with a lot of partners, whether they're public or private. So there are a number of benefits for us, but of course, by extension, for you, because we're all connected on this journey. And speaking about the journey, maybe we could go to the next slide. I could share a little bit of what we've achieved so far, but CAE, we've really started on the ESG journey, I would say 7 years ago. Before that, we were not structured like many companies. We were doing a lot of good things on these three pillars, but they were not structured and not reported. So on the environment front, right now, we're very proud to say that we were the first carbon neutral Canadian aerospace company on a worldwide level, and we've been so for the last 3 years. It started in 2020, so we really wanted to take a stance and show to the world that we were serious about climate action, that we wanted to demonstrate and inspire other companies that you could take some actions right now. And it needs to hurt a little bit because, of course, we are paying for some compensation of our direct emissions, but it's kind of a built-in incentive for us to help us further reduce. All of our sites right now are either covered 100% sourced with renewable energy or covered by what we call the RECs, the renewable energy certificates. But we know that being carbon neutral for what we call the Scope 1 and Scope 2 emissions is not enough, and we have to decarbonize and further reduce our emissions at the source, and we need to do so with our suppliers. We will need to take a net zero commitment, and that will need to include the carbon footprint of our suppliers, what we call the Scope 3. And right now, we only have an estimate of our Scope 3 based on spent, but we haven't started really having any discussions with our suppliers on how we're going to further reduce our emissions together. But in the aviation industry, I guess everyone is probably aware that as an industry, we have taken the commitment to net zero by 2050, and therefore everybody's intertwined and interconnected there. So we'll need to support the decarbonization of our whole industry. On the social pillar, of course, making the world safer. So our social impact on safety is really at the core of what we do. We have a very elaborate program on diversity, equity, and inclusion. It's central to our culture and how we make an impact on our industry. And last year, Salima, you hosted a panel for our suppliers on explaining diversity, equity, and inclusion, how we want to associate ourselves with some suppliers that are from diverse suppliers, how some of our suppliers can get obtained various certifications that are out there. So again, we are working inside our company, outside to help our customers diversify, especially around the pilots, but also with our suppliers. We're fostering quality education through career programs, events, and scholarships. It's very important to us. And of course, we're supporting local economies and communities. And as I mentioned before, the social pillar could be very extensive. So I could speak a lot of everything that we've been doing, especially during the pandemic, leading a vaccination coalition, reinventing ourselves to produce some ventilators when the world was needing some, and we had not done that before to really help society. But I think this pillar is also very important. And on the governance, of course, it's all about disclosure, transparency of our ESG program. And of course, I hope you're all aware and you've all signed our code of supplier conduct. We had a code of business conduct that was applicable to suppliers, but this year we actually decided to make it very clear and ask our suppliers to sign a code of conduct that really clarifies our expectations around a lot of things, including human rights and avoiding modern slavery. So our journey continues. The bar keeps rising every year. I think that's why we say it's a journey. It's not about the end. It's about the destination, and it's going to take many years for us to continue to improve. And this year, and we can go maybe to my last slide to help us basically get organized. We've created my position as a Chief Sustainability Officer. Created the position of Chief Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Officer with Pascal Alpha. And of course, you'll hear in a few minutes from Bernard Ross, our Vice President of Global Strategic Sourcing, who is, getting organized under sourcing to make sure that we are evolving our ESG structure there. So I think, we're giving ourselves the attention and the resources that is important because it's one of our strategic priorities. So before I turn it over to Salima, I want to thank you for joining us today because ESG is really at the core of what we do. It's very important to us. And we hope you're going to leave this webinar by thinking it should be also important to you and that we are in this together, in this journey together. We will work as a team to improve our impact on society, reduce our impact on the environment, and increase our governance and disclosure together. So thank you very much for joining us, and over back to you, Salima.
Thank you, Hélène. Thank you for sharing with us the importance of ESG initiatives for CAE. I now invite Bernard Ross to make his remarks.
Thanks, Salima, and thank you all the suppliers that have joined on the line today. Very much appreciated. I know we had a DE&I forum this time last year, so we're just building on the continuation of that story. So I'd like to kind of share with you what we're doing inside supply chain at CAE. And, we've broken down our supply chain sustainability into 3 key pillars. The first one is really focused on partnerships. And when we reflected back on our journey so far, and Hélène very eloquently explained, it is really a journey. We're learning as we go. We really realized we needed to develop partnerships, and I broke the partnerships into 3. One was really focused on supplier development. So we have worked with many partners in the Montreal and global arena to develop our suppliers and start them on this journey. So if there's Montreal suppliers on the line today, you can work with Aero Montréal, Eco Responsabilité, and they can help you start your journey for ESG. So we also then partnered with the International Aerospace Governance Body to focus on sustainability for best practices. So we wanted to be influential in terms of where is ESG going in the aerospace industry, and how do we become part of that decision and influencing process? So we're going to partner with them, and all the major OEMs in the aerospace industry are part of that committee. And then Hélène spoke very well about the social economy. So we're also partnering with companies that are really focused on the social economy. And just to give you a magnitude on that, in Montreal, there's 2,780 enterprises focused on social economy. So as you look at your local ecosystem, wherever you are in the world, there are resources and a lot of partnerships that are willing to invest time and money to support you start your ESG journey. So we really felt that was the first step for us, was to engage in these partnerships. The second, which is kind of the core activity, especially when I speak to suppliers, the real question is, how do I reduce my CO2 emissions? And how do I drive a circular economy? So I think CO2 emissions is pretty self-explanatory. We want to reduce our carbon footprint. A circular economy is also at the same time looking at how do we repair, reuse, recycle, or repurpose what we're using, right? So I think all suppliers can look at their own facilities and say, okay, how can I drive down emissions? But how can I create these circular economies? So that's what we're really focusing on. That's where we'll be reaching out to our supply chain partners to work on solutions there. And finally, you need governance, and then also refer to it, but we need to build a risk management and ESG framework so we can anticipate the ever-evolving regulations that are out there, conflict minerals, REACH, modern slavery, complicated and different in every country. So we have to be on top of that, anticipate what's coming, and be able to embed those into our processes. So that's the approach we took. And if I go to the next slide, John, maybe I'll get into a bit more detail in terms of, okay, that's great what I said, but what are we actually doing within CAE? So we're modifying our processes. So this is big. You have to modify your processes. So the supplier code of conduct is in our purchase order terms and conditions. So any supplier that gets our purchase order is acknowledging our supplier code of conduct. We are also embedding ESG requirements in our request for proposal or request for quote process. So as we go out to suppliers for requests, there will be criteria to be answered around your ESG journeys. And Hélène mentioned on real estate, we've already started, when we build new buildings in real estate, we build them green per country. Like Australia recently, we're starting a building in Australia. We're meeting all the local regulatory requirements when it comes to green buildings. And we're using sustainable material in those buildings, like solar panels, LED lighting, green concrete, et cetera, et cetera. So we've made really great strides what we can control in terms of our new footprint. So the ask in the middle will be that we start engaging with the suppliers. So we're going to have a supplier forum in early 2023, and we're going to support all of you on your ESG journeys. And we understand that we're all at various stages of maturity, so we want to get there together. So we're going to embark on an ESG journey together. We're going to reach out to our suppliers, and we're going to ask to evaluate your ESG compliance, so we understand where you are in your journeys, and we will come together with a plan as to how we get to our 2050 goal, as Hélène mentioned, of being carbon neutral in the aerospace industry. We're also building a supplier recognition program that will promote suppliers that have best practices in ESG. And finally, the total cost of ownership, it's key. So we have to measure the changes we make and put them into action. So very simple. We just have to identify the opportunities for carbon reduction and put a plan in place to make these happen. So in summary, modify your processes, engage with your suppliers, your sub-tiers, and measure and action your changes. And on the final slide, I'll just talk about the benefits of ESG. So yes, this is all great to talk about, but there are real tangible benefits. There is a huge competitive advantage for you to diversify your labor, improve labor conditions, work within the community. As Ellen mentioned, we had different campaigns on the ventilator, on providing masks for the government during COVID. These all strengthen your company brand. So that's why ESG is so important to give you a competitive advantage. We definitely see that it attracts investors and lenders. And the first question they ask our executive team is, what is our ESG journey and where we're at? And that attracts people to invest in companies. Without doubt, improving the financial performance of the company. We implemented Ariba 2 years ago. We're still on the journey of implementation, but we saved 140,000 pages of paper so far, the equivalent of like 17 trees. That's just one example of different projects that help reduce, and reduce cost and improve the bottom line and ROI. Building customer loyalty. So as your customer, if you have an ESG roadmap and clear attainable goals, that's very appealing to me and my organization. That is who we want to partner with going forward. So very important, and that goes for any customer in the airspace industry. And finally, create sustainable operations for your companies, right? You save costs by implementing LED lighting, by reducing water consumption, etc. So really, it helps drive reduction of operational costs. So lots of benefits. Really, we're just trying to get organized so we can track and monitor these benefits. But I'm really excited about the journey ahead of us. There's a lot more to come. There's a lot more engagement. So thank you for listening to me today. And I wish you all the best of luck on your journeys. And please feel free to reach out to me and my team if you have any questions. Thanks, Salima. Back to you.
Thank you, Bernard, for sharing with us how our suppliers can make a difference. I think it's really, really important for everyone to hear about that. This is a very exciting time for ESG initiatives within the business world as a whole. And I am thrilled to have with us 3 panelists who will share their insights on this most important topic. First, we have Mr. Bernd Ewers, Director of Sustainability Programs at Collins Aerospace. Bernd leads sustainability programs across the enterprise. He is an aerospace engineer by training and joined Collins Aerospace in 2001, where he held various positions in the fields of engineering, business development, and more recently, government relations in the EU, France, and Germany. Bernd is also vice chair of the Transport, Energy, and Climate Committee at the American Chamber of Commerce Industry Organization in Brussels. Bernd is joining us from Toulouse, France. Next, we have Mr. Madison Gunter. Madison is Senior Director, Supplier Diversity, Supplier Sustainability Programs at Salesforce. He has 20+ years of experience leading global teams in the areas of supplier diversity, workforce diversity, offsets and counter trade, technical marketing engineering, and channel business development. Previously, Madison was also a small business owner, Gunter Group Incorporated, which has had a huge amount of success working with small, medium, and enterprise-sized businesses. Madison is from San Francisco, California, but joining us today from the East Coast. Finally, we have Ms. Lori Benson, EY Canadian Leader, Environmental Social Governance Services, Supply Chain Services. Lori actively supports development programs and networking opportunities that promote sharing of best practices in supply chain, is involved with many advocacy councils in Canada, and leading EY's PAR certification journey. Lori advocates for an inclusive supply chain where Indigenous and minority suppliers experience growth and development opportunities in the Canadian marketplace through supplier diversity initiatives. She has won numerous awards, such as the SCMA 100 Influential Women in Canadian Supply Chain and CGLCC LGBT+ Supplier Diversity Ambassador of the Year, to name only a few. Lori is joining us today from the Toronto area here in Canada. Welcome, Bernd, Madison, and Lori. So the three companies represented here are quite advanced in their ESG initiatives. Can you tell us what ESG means for your respective companies and why it was important to take action? Madison, how about we start with you?
Absolutely. So the first thing I want to say is thank you to you, Salima, and CAE for this opportunity. I'm really impressed with the journey that you all have started. So to answer your question, Salesforce, as many of you are familiar with, is a global CRM organization. And in our core values, two of those core values, so the five core values are trust, customer success, innovation. The two that fall directly to this are equality and sustainability. So as you can imagine, this is the core value of the company that horizontally crosses the company that immediately says that this is very important to us as a whole for a company. And more specifically for myself, since the area that I lead are the areas that I lead are two of the core values, that you can imagine how important it is for me and to get my job done on a daily basis within supply chain. So again, it's a key, there are key components of the company as a whole. So from that, it directly comes down to every employee within the company.
Thank you, Madison. Lori, what about you? What is EY doing?
Well, first, I'd like to just take a moment to begin by acknowledging the Indigenous people of all the lands we are on today. I am coming to you from the traditional territories of the Anishinaabe, Mississauga, and Wendat, whose lands are my home. And I acknowledge the truth and legacy of colonialism, and I am committed to an ongoing process of reconciliation. So in answer to your question, and I will say the journey, and it was alluded to by earlier presenters, is a long journey. It's not short term, and it continually evolves. And ESG became incredibly important to EY as an organization many years ago. So we started our journey, actually our CCAS, our climate and sustainability team's been in place for over 27 years. So that's been around a long time. And I think the social in the ESG has been almost 20 years now. And we went on a journey because of creation of long-term value and to create a better working world. And it sets the purpose for the organization. And I think, if we look at society today and, everything that happened and it was impacted through COVID, some of the racialization of particular communities, it's been really difficult to see some of these things. It's been very heartfelt, and they're happening in our own markets, across the globe. And so from our perspective, ESG initiatives became more important and were highlighted more in the creation of the value and the purpose for EY.
Thank you, Lori. You started your journey a very long time ago. Very, very nice. Bernd, over to you.
Yes, so good morning and bonjour from Toulouse. Salima, thank you for the opportunity to speak at this panel. And I must say I'm impressed by the journey that CAE has already done on sustainability. Now let me talk a little bit about sustainability at Collins Aerospace. Similarly to what you presented before, what Bernard presented and Ellen presented before, ESG and several aspects of ESG are not new for our industry. So Collins Aerospace, we are one of the biggest global aerospace suppliers. We do avionics, we do We do cabin interiors, power systems, and many more systems that go on aircraft. So for us, ESG is important from the environmental aspect, of course, because decarbonizing aviation is I think it's becoming a societal question, really. So people are really looking at our industry to decarbonize aviation, and we are part of an initiative that's called Fly Net Zero that we committed to in October 2021. And now, happy to, many of you know this probably, but in just a couple of weeks ago, ICAO also adopted Fly Net Zero as a long-term aspirational goal. So this is one of the reasons why Collins, of course, started to invest in environmental ESG. But then also, I would say, our journey started with our stakeholders are asking for it. Our customers, government regulators, and in Europe, I think you can feel it very, very strongly. And then last but not least, we also feel that our employees are looking at to work at a sustainable company. And then you mentioned that before also. We see at Collins sustainability really as a business opportunity. It's not something that, okay, you have to comply with the requirements and regulations. That's part of it, of course, but it's really an opportunity. It's an opportunity for our business. And we are a technology company. So sustainability is about innovation, product innovation, process innovation, but also the innovation of, how we do business. And I think that's part of our DNA. So for us, it was kind of obvious that we had to embark on this sustainability and ESG roadmap.
Thank you. You mentioned some very interesting points, and your companies have followed the trends going on, but we have a lot of our suppliers that are SMEs. They haven't even started their journey on ESG. So how can they go about doing that? How can they what are the key drivers that they can use to implement their strategies? Madison, would you like to start?
Sure. I think that that's a great question, because you and I both know that the larger corporations, they get it, they jump on board, they have the resources, and they start their journey. But that's a whole different story for someone that is smaller, that doesn't already have the resources, doesn't already know where to go. So the key things that I think are very important for the suppliers are to reach out to their clients, right? Reach out to them and say, do you have a program? Is there a partnership where I can get involved in? Believe it or not, many of us big corporations have already set aside resources and put together programs to embrace and incorporate them into. So it's phenomenal that you actually take action, right? You have to get engaged if you're an SME. You have to say, hey, I'm going to start this, however long it takes for this journey, I'm going to get started. And the first thing I'm going to do is start reaching out and seeing what's out there, what's available, what resources I can partner up with, and then start that step, And as they say, a baby crawls before it walks, right? So you have to crawl, you have to walk, and then you're able to run. So I believe that wholeheartedly.
Thank you. Lori, I think you wanted to add something.
I just love the energy Madison put into that answer. It is so true. There is a network of individuals that care, and we want to see our suppliers do well. And we want to see them have the capacity to manage ESG, but also to grow. And what's really important is that everybody's in it. It's not, you know, a silo. It's everybody's in it. We all want to see, you know, the ESG measures, the capabilities within the marketplace, within our suppliers, to really help embrace. And it's through working together that we're going to be able to succeed in the journey. We can't do it without the suppliers and their energy and enthusiasm to ask the questions and network and find out what's available, because you just need to start. It's pretty simple.
Thanks, Laurie. Absolutely. Bernd, what would you like to add to that?
Yes, well, I mean, a lot has already been said, but I would fully agree that, I mean, our supply base is really the key to the success here. And as I said, for Collins, we saw immediately ESG as a discriminator, as a potential to differentiate ourselves. If you're good at it, I think it's a real business opportunity. And I think that's what we have to understand. Now, on the other hand, I think, Madison, you said it, for our big companies and, you know, operations, it's probably have the resources more easily, although it's not so obvious all the time. But, you know, for SMEs, it may be a little bit more difficult, and you may see it as a cost burden, as a burden on resources. But there's a lot of help out there. So, for example, we at Collins, we are working with our supply chain partners to help you on the journey. We are also working together with industry to make sure that we are standardizing the way that we measure, report, and assess sustainability. That's a very important part of it. And so, for example, Collins with other OEM leaders, manufacturers in the aerospace industry, we have been part of IAEG, the International Aerospace Environmental Group, to define standards across the supply chain, and then also to choose a common supplier that can do the assessment. And in that process, we have actually tested, you know, different sizes, different type of suppliers to make sure it's a process that's feasible for everyone. So in short, I think there's a lot of help out there, and I completely agree what Laurie and Madison say. Get started. It's a business opportunity.
Absolutely. And for those who are not familiar with IAEG, I invite you to look it up. It's the International Aerospace Environment Group, and read about their mission and the work that they're doing. It's quite inspiring. So, you know, what will be the differences then between the suppliers that are providing products or goods and material versus the suppliers that are delivering services? I'll invite maybe Laurie to start with that.
Sure. So when we're moving with product, you know, there's all kinds of elements of, and I think Bernard alluded to it with the circular economy and understanding where products come from. And what's really important is to look at the overall, right? So a simple example could be buying T-shirts, you know, branded T-shirts for, you know, Truth and Reconciliation Day here in Canada. You need to not only know that the T-shirt has some meaning and shows and influences the Indigenous communities. It's also about, where did the T-shirt come from? You know, and, you know, are we sure that that T-shirt is made without the impacts of modern slavery or, you know, other harmful chemicals within the environment? So it's really looking at your whole supply chain when you're talking about a product, understanding where it comes from, You know, what is the impact of that? And interestingly enough, that really leans a little bit into supplier diversity as well, because when you look at some of the impacts that can be from importing offshore, onshore, you know, you can kind of look at those arguments with another value connection, and understanding that perhaps there should be some continual value of looking at onshore. The services, services are important because we're a services organization. You know, we don't create a product. Our product is people and our thought leadership and, you know, the support and transformation, et cetera. So the services that we provide, it's still important that the companies you're using that are providing services are behaving in a way that you also wish to show and behave in the marketplace. And it's important to EY with our suppliers that our suppliers that provide us services, we want to make sure that they are behaving in similar ways and are upholding our purpose and our brand. You know, the years have gone by, but you know, you can think about all the different examples that happen in the globe. And why do we have sustainable procurement as a real value contributor today through ESG initiatives is that, you know, we don't want to be having our brand, you know, on the news because all of a sudden there's some kind of slave labor or a factory, you know, crumbled and et cetera. So it's important across the board. And so regardless of whether you're selling services or selling products, there's an element of ESG in all of it.
Madison, what do you see as challenges in each of these areas?
First, I want to say I recognize that when you have a product versus a services, there are different challenges. So I want to bring that to the forefront, right? You know, the challenges you have if you have, let's just say a box, just to be simple. If you have a box, when what goes into that box and how that box is made up is going to be very different challenge than if you have a service oriented where you have people or thoughts coming in. So I understand that, and I want to recognize that first. But with that being said, the core of these things are very similar. And Laura, you said it very eloquently, which I probably can't reproduce, but anyway, I'll try. The core of that, of what the makeup is of that product or service has to be defined. And once you define what that core is and bringing to ESG of what is the makeup, if you can decrease the emissions on it or carbon on the product portfolio of what's being made, or even if you're looking at, and I'll say this out loud, even if you're looking at the makeup of the teams that are producing the service, right? So you have to be very intentional about what that product or service is and what is underneath that, because those things, and the last thing I'll say, I promise I'll get off the stage at this point, but Bernd said a great thing. He said, you know, they're looking at this, and his company Collins is looking at this and have defined it with an external group. We do this all the time. We define it with a group that is third party and an organization that we trust, and we will partner with them to draw the best practices. So.
Thank you, Madison. Always a pleasure to listen to you define the goals. Bernd, do you see the same differences at Collins?
Yeah, I see the same differences, but also the same. Actually, I must say the requirements in ESG are probably not very different whether you're a service provider or whether you are you manufacture a product. Okay, of course, you know, if you look at specific aspects of ESG, like carbon footprint. It's different when you do a service or when you do a when you design a box, as you said at Madison. But at the end of the day, most of the requirements of sustainability will be applied to the company, the way we do business. I think that's the important thing. I think I don't know who said it, Laurie or Madison. You talked about I think collaboration across the industry, and let me maybe tell you a little bit of how Collins Aerospace, what's our initiatives on sustainability, and we have defined 3 pillars really. One of them is stakeholder engagement, and the second one is innovation or technology roadmap, and the third one is industrial roadmap. And that describes really what we have to do as Collins, as a product provider, but also we provide services. For example, services may also lead to reducing carbon footprints on aircraft. So we provide services that can improve the operational efficiency of aircraft, and that's an example for reducing the carbon footprint. So, but okay, Large and Bayer would say the requirements are very similar to it's a way of doing business.
That's very true, and I'm thinking about these small, the SMEs and companies who haven't begun or who are just beginning their journey. How can we help them define their goals, and how would they prioritize what ESG initiatives that needs to be focused on most? Madison?
Sure, great question. So if I was doing it, and I've had a small business, so if I was looking at it from that lens, the first thing I would do would look at my clients, right? All of my clients, my top clients, and I would look at what is their initiatives? What are they doing as a company? And I would try to outline and mimic some of those things. I know for sure that you can't do everything because they're larger companies. I get that. Don't get me wrong. I understand. However, there are key things that they are doing that you can start implementing into your own organization. So that would be the first thing. The second thing I'm going to say is it's a matter of time before that company, your client, comes to you and asks or requests, or even like Salesforce we have an exhibit that you have to sign on to for sustainability and diversity when you are onboarded as a supplier. So why not get ahead of the game, right? Get ahead of the ask. And so those are the things that was the process that I would use as I was looking at it.
Thank you. Laurie?
Again, it really is out there. I mean, you can search supplier code of conduct for pretty much any business and see what elements, for the companies you want to do business with. I think in the view of a small business, you'll also be able to engage, hopefully it's more than a team of one, but you'll find enthusiastic people within your organization that will also pick up the charge, and so it's not one person, it's an overall collaboration with all people within the organization. And the youth today, talk a lot about the Gen Z, and the youth coming into the working world, they're done with false statements, and they'll see through it and they look for it. They'll creep on it on social media and wherever they need to find the real truth. So having those advocates within your own organization will help you to be able to stimulate some more, and it also helps to stand up your own business purpose. So I would say, along with what Madison has shared, look at the different supplier codes of conduct, get ahead of the game, engage your own people, see what's important to them from an ESG perspective, and start thinking about how you can implement that.
Bernd, do you agree? Are you aligned?
Yeah, I fully agree. And actually, both of you mentioned two components which I think are essential for ESG. So if you set your priorities, no matter what size of a company, I think the first thing you want to do is you listen to your, of course, to your stakeholders. They will tell you what the propriorities are, and they will help you. That's for sure. And then the people element, I think, Laurie, that's a very important question here, because we're talking about the company culture. Because you can do sustainability as, tick the box, make sure you're compliant, but that's not going to get you there as a real discriminator. What I've experienced in Collins, we started off, when we put all this together, we started off with what we call a task force. And I was amazed and surprised how many volunteers we got on the phone and who were interested in sustainability, and how many projects in remote sites all over the world they brought to the table. And so it wasn't really difficult, let's say, to implement sustainability as a change project. I think there was enough enthusiasm in our company already, and so it was really not that difficult to get this culture initiated.
That's very interesting, and I'm listening to the three of you speak, and the three of you are from different regions of the world, and it seems to me that the messages and the ideas are aligned across the board. So it's very interesting to see that. I'd like to understand more. We talk about environment and social and governance. If I'm looking at the social aspect of it, what role can suppliers play to mitigate human rights risks? Bernd, go ahead.
Yeah, I was just going to say this is a very important aspect, I think. So when I look from a Collins or even Raytheon Technologies perspective, we have visibility of our tier 1, tier 2 suppliers, but I think the risk lies beyond that. And what we have to, so it's a question of risk, and I don't know who said it before, you don't want to be in the news because somewhere at your supply chain, there is a human rights violation. I mean, that's really a very, very important aspect of sustainability. And, I think, as we said it before, I mean, it's a way of doing business, and violating human rights is not, at Collins, at Raytheon Technologies, it's not the way we want to do business. And in our supply base, we cannot tolerate this. So, but I think the supply base, what's important is here around the network, across the network, we have to make sure that we see where the risks are, because it's not always obvious. So I think that's very important that we look beyond and across the entire value chain.
So yeah, you're right. You have to look at, identify first of all what the risks could possibly be. Yeah. Laurie, how would you mitigate that then once the identification is done?
Well, I mean, obviously you have to make some tough choices, right? There can be changes, obviously, in supplier. There'll be individual businesses that you may not want to do business with. Hopefully you can capture that before you get into a relationship, but also exploring the relationships you already have. From a sustainability perspective, we took an initiative in our supply chain services team to actually have 75% of our suppliers by 2025 signed up to science-based targets. It's a lot of work, and those in procurement will understand the amount of work that takes to have happen. It's important, though. It's an important measure, and it's important from a supply chain perspective to understand and have that transparency in your supply chain. And that's an expectation. So, so from a branding perspective as a supplier, you want to know every element of your supply chain. And what's really interesting, and I know Madison, you'll agree with this, is that typically diverse suppliers are smaller and they know their supply chain. And even throughout the pandemic, we found that diverse suppliers were able to identify when products would land, or gee, you know what, that's not going to show up. We're going to need a contingency plan. So keeping your supply chain knowledge, knowing where things come from, and understanding who you want to do business with and where the risks are, you might want to change the countries that your supplies are coming from. And there's all kinds of I guess warning signs out there. What's important is we're going to rely on our suppliers to help us with that as well. So it's a true collaboration.
Absolutely. Madison?
I would just add, I mean, both of my colleagues here on the panel have said it very well. But so the only thing I would add on top of that, this is why what we call the SBR, that's a supplier business review. Some of you call it scorecarding and so on and so forth. But that's why this is so important, because it allows you that visibility. Now, I say that because you may have a company that decides, oh, well, we're going to produce a product or service or whatever, and then they have to switch in their supply chain. This is after you've already brought them on board and everything seems to be okay and fine. But then a year down the road, if you don't have that recognition, some type of management within, then you will never know. And heaven forbid, like Laura Enburn said, you don't want to end up on the news, right? No one wants to be on the news, because at that point, it's a little bit too late. So those would be the only things that I would add to that question.
Thank you. Earlier we touched a little bit about this is a sound business decision, right? Taking these initiatives is good for business. But we always say that cash is what always drives corporate initiatives. So how can we attach a monetary value to an ESG initiative?
I'll start off.
Go ahead, Madison.
We've recently incorporated an executive compensation piece. And so I probably shouldn't tell you all the aspects of it, but I will tell you this part, that at a certain level, EVP and above, part of their bonus compensation is positioned around ESG. Now, I'm going to say this. When your money, your bonus has a requirement on it, believe me, most people listen and they listen very well. And guess what? Things get done. So with that, I would say that that's one initiative that we've instituted, and it, unfortunately for me, because my team is responsible for a piece of it, so I get a lot of looks around bonus time, right? But the fortunate piece is that overall it's a good thing.
Thank you. Lori, what would you like to add to that?
I would just say, and I spoke about it during another question that we covered, but people are pretty smart these days, and they know when a company has a CSR report out there and they have a look at it, and then they go to social media and find out what's really out there. If you want to hire the best people, the people who are going to fit within your organization, you can't do things in a non-transparent way. You need to take responsibility. And so linking the value to the organizational strategy is key. And so any initiative that is undertaken, it's always important to look at your business strategy, your overall company purpose. And you can align anything within ESG typically to the company purpose. Defining that and, what matters to your market. And your market is key as well. When you take a look at the different government mandates that are coming out, the different modern slavery laws, there's just no tolerance. So you can look at the value in the behaviors and how you link your ESG strategies to those behaviors. So just want to say the impact on people, if you can't fill the seats in your organization, it's a problem,
Thank you, Laurie. Bernd, what would you like to add to that?
Yeah, I think the question, was probably also about return on investment.
Exactly.
And of course, we have to make sure that sustainability is also about business sustainment. So which, by the way, is part of our targets, really. But I would say, I would see the return on investment. It's a long-term strategy. It's a long-term investment, and that will pay out. It's really about your company strategy. Although you may find some low-hanging fruits. We have had projects that had a fantastic return on investment by reducing our carbon footprint. It took some public funding, which is available. There's a lot available right now in Europe, at least, I think, but I think in Canada and North America, it's similar. Look at that. And then I think many ESG projects, they have a good return on investment. And once again, I said it before, we at Collins see ESG as an opportunity, and it's an entrepreneurial thing, I would say. So yes, it's a long-term strategy.
Absolutely. This isn't something that we can do overnight, that's for sure. In closing, I see we have a lot of questions coming in, and I want to give some time for Q&A. What message would you give to our suppliers that are listening to us today? How can they help? Laurie.
I think any supplier can help just by getting started. And, if you're not clear, reach out and ask. The community is available to you. And it's something I think that most of the suppliers understanding that the contributions that they make to their clients and, and then our clients to the next client. So when you think about how, the one message, how, just get started, ask some questions, engage.
Thank you. Madison. Oh, you're mute. We always make that mistake.
My apologies. I didn't. Okay. I'm still on mute.
No, you're fine. We can hear you now.
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay. My apologies. I thought I had a echo. So I would say make a statement. If you are a senior leader or you have a senior leader, whatever company you are, make a statement. Make a statement and say, this is the route or this is the journey we're going to take. However you want to say it, because normally when you make a statement towards an initiative like ESG, then there is some follow-up. And we've all, said this probably more times than you want to hear as an audience, but you have to get started on this journey. So the first thing you would do is make a statement. And that would be the advice I would give.
Okay, thank you. I just want to thank you, Laurie, Madison, and Bert, for this really enlightening conversation. Thank you for joining us from around the world, I can say. This has been really, really nice. And I want to now turn it over to the audience because we have a lot of questions coming in, and I have two screens that I'm looking at. So I'm going to manage this. Let's see. So I guess what the first question that I see here is, will the CAE logistics team get dedicated budget funds to absorb the additional staff costs of using alternative fuels on air shipments? Bernard, would you like to address that one? I'm going to bring him back on screen. Bernard Ross.
Okay, Bernard.
Bernard.
You can go ahead, Bert, but I would just say, you know, our top priority at CAE right now is looking at Scope 3, which was mentioned in our chat. So Scope 3, in terms of priority, it's really the manufacturing of components that go into our simulators is our top priority and what we're trying to tackle first. 67% of our Scope 3 is actually product-related CO2 emissions. So yes, I think fuel is very important depending on the industry. If you're an airline, obviously, way more important. For us, we have a lot less consumption of fuel, but it is something that we're going to have to tackle, but it's going to be down the road. So I don't know the exact timing of it, but it is an important topic, and it's important that we understand our consumption and buying green fuel. It's important that we start to understand that, but right now our focus is going to be on product transformation, I guess.
Thank you, Bernard. We have another question here. On the execution front, how are you organized to address the issues? What is the operational model of your organization? Dedicated teams, specific committees, subject matter experts? Bernd, would you like to start?
Yes, so we have a I would say layered organization around ESG. It starts with our parent company, Raytheon Technologies. We have a steering committee, so ESG Council steering committee is reporting to the board. Then we flow this down to the business unit. So at Collins, we have a chief sustainability officer, we have a council, and then it goes down into the business. But one thing which I'd like to mention here, we have a task force, and that task force is open to all our employees. And I think that's a very powerful tool, which allows employees to get engaged, to also get involved in sustainability.
Thank you. Madison.
I would say yes. Yes to all of those things that you asked. Which way? So, I mean, in essence, we have teams that are fully engaged into ESG and each pillar of ESG. So, as I told you before, I own the supply chain piece of ESG, and I have the team specifically for sustainability, one specifically for diversity, one is specifically for risks and compliance, governance there. So there are specific individuals and teams that are responsible for these initiatives and how they play out in the broader sense. On top of that, we have also task force for horizontal initiatives that may come up that touched ESG, like something when George Floyd in the States was murdered, that a task force was brought up. So individually, things like that, you will have a task force that comes together from multitude of different organizations to get to a certain end goal. And then the last thing I'll say around that is within the business itself, you have what you call champions. So they're the leads within that business that actually is part of forming the sustainability initiative and working with my team to make sure that we get to our goals. So it is kind of a yes to all of those things that you asked.
Thank you. Lori, would you like to add to that?
Well, Madison stole my answer to that, yes, for all of it. The one thing that I will add is, you know, from the people perspective again, that we give lots of opportunity for our people to get involved, whether it's with our supplier diversity programs, whether it's with our mentorship and development programs, whether it's with sustainability. We have Eco Innovators, which is there for many of our people to join and engage in environmental. And then from a governance perspective, we're continually looking at ways we can engage all of the ESG measures under the governance. So from a procurement perspective, our global procurement policy includes measures of ESG as well. So it's really about having everyone engaged. And so the answer is yes.
Thank you. Another question. Can you give an example on how your organization is integrating sustainability considerations to business models, strategies, and risk management? Who would like to start?
Maybe I can start off. I don't know if it exactly will respond to the question, but one thing we have done quite early on is we have in Collins, we have what's called Collins Management System. So that's kind of our, that's how our operations system. And what we have done is we have integrated sustainability in this management system, from the early stages. And that really means, for example, for product design, that when we make design choices, when engineering, when we start a new product or modify a product, that we take sustainability into consideration from the early stage on. And so environmental, but not only, so for the entire ESG aspect. And I think this leads to something where we in Collins will, we have to investigate more, which is now called life cycle assessment. Is when you do your product design, that you, from the very beginning, you look at a design which minimizes your environmental footprint, but also taking into account all other aspects like safety and product performance and so forth. So that's something which we are starting our journey on, and that's something which is becoming very important.
Thank you, Bert. Lori, would you like to respond to that?
Just add a little bit there is, in regards to ESG, it's across the full value chain of an organization. So we help a lot of our clients with ESG. And I'm just going to speak about our internal because that's where I sit. And the value creation for us is knowing that we've got that ESG measure, that we have the components in place to be able to manage, mitigate the risk, to be able to give our teams the ability to know and understand the impacts, and looking at how they can learn and develop and grow. I think we've all alluded to it in a couple of questions that were asked earlier, but it's everyone's responsibility within an organization.
Thank you. Madison?
I would say that, and hopefully I'm answering the question correctly, but I would say that, we at Salesforce use a lot of our own products meaning our platform, to actually do the measurements and things that we need to accomplish within the company. So for instance, there's a sustainability cloud, which sits on the platform for Salesforce, right? We're working to have a supplier diversity one that would support. All of these support ESG, right? So there's a number of different things that teams are working on to support as an overall company initiative, and then tools come in, and then eventually things roll into our platform, which makes it a lot easier for us. So those things, kind of become seamless at a point. And I'm not going to say, with the exception of the sustainability cloud, all the other things are still in progress and working through them to make sure that we have identified the right key things. But it's a process that we ongoingly do as a company, and that it's been successful thus far.
Thank you. Thank you very much. I see we're almost at time. There are some other questions. One of them is the presentation going to be shared? Yes, we will be sharing the presentations with everyone. And then another question that came up is, people are very interested in this topic and they want to know how to start. So we invite all of the suppliers to reach out to your counterparts at CAE, the people that you work with, our global strategic sourcing team, and we will then definitely work with you on starting your initiatives in ESG. On that, I want to thank everybody for the great questions. Thank you for today's presentation. This has been a fascinating conversation. As we have heard, building a vibrant workplace culture is a continuous journey. Corporate social responsibility, diversity, equity, and inclusion, and ESG are practices. They are not something that one can achieve and mark as finished. They need to be thought of like a daily exercise. They require us all to stay present and engaged. This concludes CAE's virtual panel discussion on a global view on ESG best practices and why it should matter to suppliers. We hope that today's discussion has given you some insights that you may be able to apply in your own organizations. Thank you all for joining us today, and thank you again to all of our panelists for sharing their most enlightening thoughts and experiences. I wish you all a good rest of the afternoon. Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.